Funny that everything that we grew up with here is changing. There's all kinds of stuff that we can point to right now, from the level of our seas, which have risen over 8 inches in the last century, the acid in our oceans, which is now 30% more prevalent than it ever was before. We can talk about our trade winds. Thank God they're here today, but they're not there very often anymore. And we have so much more that we have to adapt to so very fast. But that's not the end of the story, because there's so much more that's changing that's positive. Predominantly people's attitudes more than anything. For the first time in decades, we're having legitimate discussions about what this means, not only here in Hawaii, but around the nation. And that's really, really exciting. The challenge is figuring out how we can turn those conversations and that discussion into action on the part of our legislators, our Congress, on the folks that need to take action to make change happen. And it's tough. I mean, I want to tell it quite frankly, like everybody knows it, just like it is. We face significant challenges in awareness, first of all, getting people to care about species dying off every week, just like they care about characters on Game of Thrones dying off every week. We have challenges with a lot of vested interests that have a lot of profit at hand that they risk losing if things change. But it's in their interest, and it's in our interest to see that through and make sure it happens, because it's all of us collectively, our future's on the line. You can look no further than states like North Carolina, which is a fantastic example of what not to do. North Carolina, is anybody here from North Carolina? I'm about to offend a lot of folks. Matt Johnson over here. But the truth is, this is a state that, just like Hawaii, has a lot of coastline, has a lot of challenges that climate change poses to them, the least of which is storm surges and inundation in coastal areas. And so what they did, just like we're doing here, they said, you know what, we're going to take a look to the next century. What is the worst that we're going to expect? Let's do that science. Let's do that analysis and plan accordingly. And so they did. And just a few years ago came up with an assessment that said they face grave risks in coastal areas, thousands of square miles that are potentially going to be inundated, and they got to adapt. And all of a sudden, those interests that we're talking about, the folks who don't believe that there is a problem here at all, rose up and said, wait a minute, let's not be too hasty, let's think about this. Scientists are in this for the money, this is all a bunch of baloney. And what they did was pass a law that looked out not 100 years to those risks and expectations that they already had the scientific community on record on, but they looked out just a few decades, because that meant that didn't disturb the status quo. And all that land that was at risk is no longer at risk, and they can go home and tell everybody, it's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. That's not sound public policy. That's putting the blinders on because it's politically easy for you to stand before your constituents and say, yeah, it's not a problem, we're doing other things. That's not wise. That's not pono. And we can't let that sort of mentality persist in North Carolina or any other state, especially right here. We have politically incentive often not to act. And the biggest cop-out, the easiest way to dodge that sort of action that's controversial and divisive and rocks the boat, is to make it an issue of individual responsibility, that the seas are going to rise in your neighborhood, but it's probably not going to be your house, so we're just going to let those neighbors who have an issue take care of it themselves. We'll let the market sort it out. But the truth is, climate change is a much broader problem. It's a collective issue. And it demands a collective solution that includes us all, because whether you live on the coast or not, you're dealing with agriculture, the food you eat that's going to be impacted, the water you drink, which may no longer be there. Any number of other things that we can point to and say, we are in this together, and we are all going to sink or swim together. And that's why it's so important that our government steps forward at all levels to come up with solutions to prevent this before it happens, and before it becomes a challenge that we can't go back and fix. And we're not going to convince everyone, there's no question about that. There's going to be folks who deny it. Thank you. Plug for me, the guy who's running against me. But we don't have to convince everybody. It's unrealistic, it's not going to happen. We can win without that, because we just have to convince enough people to make change possible. And in a political world, that's 50% plus one. Hopefully that's 60, 70, 80% that we can reach out to and convince folks. And thanks to the Sierra Club 350.org, MoveOn.org, all the organizations who have been so fantastic. Surfrider, we've had so much momentum already here in Hawaii. We've been able to do a lot, and we are so much better off than a lot of other states. We've passed our climate change initiative, which I was proud to help play a small part in this past year. That's going to set the stage for Hawaii in the coming years, the coming decades, to adapt to the changes we know are coming. We can't stop all the other countries out there from pouring carbon into the atmosphere. We're going to have to adapt to those changes ourselves. We can do our part, and this sets the stage for that. We have come a long way, and quite frankly, one of the best things that we've seen, in addition to these first steps, is the conversation itself changing. You know, we've gone from climate change isn't real, it doesn't exist, to all right, maybe it exists, but we don't need to do anything about it. From we don't need to do anything about it to we just shouldn't move so quickly. And today our challenge is moving from we shouldn't move so quickly to let's move full steam ahead because we've only got so much time left. That's the challenge that faces us today. That's the conversation that needs to be changed. Next steps for us here in Hawaii are implementing the laws that we've already passed, recognizing this as one of the critical issues facing all of us here in the 21st century. And going beyond that, to start implementing changes at our shorelines, in our watersheds, in our lives and the way we act, in the businesses and the way they conduct themselves so that it's to the benefit of everybody here. We can do this. We've got great examples around the world. We need to implement, and with your guys' help, speaking out at the City Council, at the Legislature, contacting Brian Schatz, Mazie Hirono, our federal representatives. This is the kind of positive energy and change that's going to make these efforts come to fruition and make these things possible. It's incredibly exciting. In just a few years' time, I mean, myself, I went from a guy who didn't even vote to now I wrote this great climate change law. If I can do that, you guys can step up and do the same. Like I said, everything is changing. We're making progress. But the truth is, if we're going to keep moving, we have to make sure our collective action and that awareness in the community, that conversation moves faster and changes faster than our climate itself. So, I hand it off to all of you to take that next step. Join us, stay involved, and thank you all for showing up today.